Welcome to She Trusts Herself, the podcast for women who are learning to trust themselves, honor their inner voice, and choose themselves without guilt. I'm your host, author, guest speaker, and certified human design reader. Together, we'll explore overcoming self-doubt, building deep self-trust, personal growth, and stepping into the next version of yourself with confidence. Welcome back. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to read you one of the lessons from my second book, When Life Gives You Lessons. And the lesson that I've chosen to share is lesson number 5, when you're tempted to be an asshole. I feel like life would be easier if I was an asshole, but I don't want to be. These were the words I uttered to Jesse, my husband, when I was 29, and in the middle of the year, I was a shadow of myself. For some background, the year that I was a shadow of myself was the year that my granddad passed away, and I was navigating a lot and felt quite empty. During this year, I was emotionally worn out. It was a year that had tested my ability to be kind and patient with others. It was a year of change, grief, and feeling lost. I felt lost in who I was and the direction I wanted my life to go in. There were people who I thought would offer support, and in my eyes, they didn't. It was a compounding effect of feeling like I was giving to others when I had nothing left to give and it wasn't reciprocated. Instead, they wanted more and I couldn't give more than I already was. I felt ready to put myself first and stop giving parts of myself away to others. While I'd been focusing on trying to put myself first for a few years, this was the catalyst for change. I had enough of appeasing others at the expense of my own time, money, and/or energy. Being emotionally worn out forced me to make changes now because I knew I couldn't keep doing what I was. I evaluated how I was spending my time, energy, and money. I looked at my relationships, including the one with myself, and evaluated if I was spending too much or too little time. I made the decision to block out time on weekends to spend with Jessie and our dog Lana, as well as implement some additional self-care activities such as nature walks, yoga, and writing. My sense of self was tested in different areas of my life, including relationships, friendships, and work. I was trying to do a lot of things to appease others, and I was reaching my end point. I realized I needed to communicate my needs better, be okay with saying no more often, to avoid being a people pleaser, and be true to myself rather than lowering my standards or behavior to adapt to the situation. This year showed me that I needed to treat myself better. In most situations, you have two choices, respond or react. I prefer to respond. I was getting tempted to react and act petty. I was tired of feeling like I was getting taken advantage of. Rather than reflecting on why I felt that way, I wanted to act like an asshole, to stoop to their level. At that point, I wasn't ready to reflect on my actions that had led me to be in this situation. Some of those actions included a lack of boundaries, repressing my feelings, and creating space between myself and others when needed. Due to a lack of boundaries and poor communication, I was allowing people to walk all over me. I was giving them time and energy that I didn't want, and I was feeling resentful. Rather than addressing the issue by creating a boundary or communicating with the person, I wanted to act petty instead. As much as I wanted to act out, I didn't. Instead, I chose to withdraw and not communicate how I was feeling with others. I bottled it up and pictured situations in my head where I acted like an asshole and realized it wasn't worth behaving that way. That left me with two options: to be withdrawn or address the problem head on. During this time, I was trying to build my online network marketing business from the ground up. Rather than using social media content and captions that were provided by the leaders, I wanted to create my own. I noticed others started to use my content without permission, which irritated me. I began to focus on whether they were getting customers and inquiries based on my words. I noticed that one person was continuing to use my content, and after 5 or so posts, I decided to send them a message to address the problem directly. While I was tempted to act petty and call them out on it publicly, I knew I'd feel better if I addressed it directly with them. I asked them to stop using my content without permission, and to their credit, they did, which I appreciated. The person didn't realize their behavior upset me, and once I brought it to their attention, they apologized. While I waited longer than I could have to address the problem, I refrained from acting petty. I grew tired of feeling irritated and complaining about the problem, and it was at that point I decided to address the issue. Perhaps you've been through something similar. If you have or are going through it now, please try to avoid stooping to the level of others. It isn't worth it. Try to focus on you and find ways to replenish yourself. There will be things we go through in life which test us. During those times, give as much as you can to yourself to avoid the risk of hitting emotional burnout or acting in a way that no longer aligns with the person that you're becoming. An asshole is essentially a person who is self-centered, rude, and obnoxious. Life may seem easier if you're an asshole because you are looking out for your best interests only. It doesn't matter who gets hurt or offended in the process. If you are getting your way, you're okay, and that's all that matters. If you're typically a kind person and are tempted to start behaving this way, I'd encourage you to sit down and think about what's making you want to act out in this way. What do you need? What do you want to stop doing? Who do you feel is taking advantage of you? Rather than succumbing to acting in this matter, you can look at what's causing you to want to act in this way and then take positive action to avoid it. When you can start to understand the reasons behind your behavior, that's when you can start to make changes. Perhaps you need to distance yourself from people, say no to additional tasks at work, or start prioritizing yourself again. It could be a combination of all three things or something different altogether. Wanting to behave like an asshole could be an indicator that you're outgrowing the life that you're in, the people you're surrounded by, and or the environments you find yourself in. In a work environment, when I've grown tired of the job or feeling like I'm overworked, I tend to notice a change in my behavior. In a previous job, I was trying to complete the tasks of 3 to 4 people due to lack of staff. That increased workload continued for months, and after a while, I felt myself harboring resentment towards other people in the team. I felt like they only have one job to do and they weren't willing to take on additional tasks to support the team or lessen my load, even when I asked. While the people I was working with didn't say thank you or take on extra tasks, it was noticed by senior staff who took time to express their appreciation of what I was doing. That simple thank you lessened my resentment temporarily, and I decided that the situation wasn't going to improve and it wasn't sustainable for me to be working at that level for much longer. I didn't throw my hands up and quit, but I did start to look for other jobs. In this example, I didn't act like an asshole, although there were days I was definitely tempted to call in sick or quit. Instead, I realized that my environment needed to change as staffing levels weren't going to improve anytime soon based on communications from upper management. I took positive action by applying for jobs, and when I was successful, I was able to hand in my letter of resignation, and my oh my, was that satisfying. You may feel stuck in these situations, but I promise you there are options available to you. If you can find a way to look at the situation rationally, you can decide what your next step is, whether it's a conversation, letting go of a relationship, finding a different job, or changing your environment. You don't need to be stuck in a state of resentment or frustration, nor do you need to act like an asshole. To expand on this chapter, one of the reasons why I wrote it is because I knew that there were moments in my life where I felt very tempted to react rather than respond to situations. In the moment, it felt easier to blame other people for the situation that I put myself in and take zero accountability for it. From past experience, I know that that's not worth it. It also takes power away from you, because then you feel helpless and stuck in that situation because you've given that power away to other people, even if they don't know it. What I chose to do instead was find a different method of addressing it, and that wasn't to suppress my emotions. It was to notice when feelings of frustration or anger, and it may be frustration, anger, bitterness, or disappointment for you, that pops up, and go, okay, let me be curious about this. What is causing this feeling and what can I do about it? Rather than pointing the finger at other people or blaming them, I went, okay, well, I need to be responsible and accountable for my decisions, and this is the consequence of it. So if I don't like the consequence of the decisions that I'm making, what needs to change? That has led me to make some decisions in terms of letting go of friendships, changing jobs, different things. It's a framework that I still use now, and it ties in with human design, with your emotional green and red flag. When you know that something's not working right, then you can approach it with a curious mindset and go, okay, what needs to change? It's not about saying that you're the problem or someone else's. It's just going, okay, this situation isn't enjoyable for me anymore. What needs to change and how can I get out of it? Rather than feeling stuck and helpless, is finding solutions rather than focusing on the problem. You can either focus on finding solutions or focus on the problems. So it's just being mindful of where you're investing your time and energy, and if you don't like the situation that you're in, then you are able to change it, even though it can feel quite hard to do. If you are growing and evolving, then chances are you may be operating at a higher level than other people, and that's not to say that you're better than them. It's just you're operating at a different energy output and capacity, and maybe you've got higher standards for yourself. So when you get tempted to act petty, that's you going down to their level. While we may not be able to lift everyone up to our level, we can still lead by example. We don't need to go back down that ladder and revert to previous versions of ourselves just because we're tempted to. When that feeling starts to bottle up inside of me, what I tend to do is use a visualization technique and go, okay, if the petty part of me comes out, then how will I feel afterwards? If I react, and especially if it's a strong reaction to something such as lashing out or being petty, and even though I may feel like I'm very justified in that, I will feel mad, bad, and then sad. And I go, that cycle of feeling is not worth it for me. For those 2 seconds of false satisfaction, I look at that situation and majority of the time I go, it's not worth it, versus looking at responding and then reacting. They may not change their behaviors, but it means I'm not lowering my standards to meet them where they are and act out in a way that I will have to deal with or regret later on. I choose to keep my composure as much as possible. That is one of the lessons from the book. I'd love to know if it's something that you have navigated before, and it's just a reminder of choosing to be mindful of what you're focusing your time and energy on. You can complain and feel like a victim of your circumstances and maybe act out in a way that is out of character for you, or you can choose to have a vent about it, focus on finding solutions. It's maybe changing your environment, the people that you're around, or a relationship dynamic. But that gives the power back to you, and it makes you remember that you have the ability to change your circumstances. Not saying that it's easy, but it's definitely possible. And to me, that feels a lot more freeing than feeling helpless and stuck where you are.
And that's a wrap on another episode. If this one resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future conversations, and share it with someone else who's learning to trust herself again. You can connect with me on Instagram, Tash, where I share more about self-trust, personal growth, and human design. If you'd like to go deeper, you can explore my books and offerings, all designed to support you as you build self-trust and step into the next version of yourself with confidence. Until next time, please remember that you are not too much or too little. You're just you. Keep choosing yourself.